Good afternoon. Welcome to Salisbury Cathedral's reflection for Friday, the 31st, last day of July, and welcome. I'm Edward Probert, I'm the Canon Chancellor here, and it's my privilege to talk to you again tonight. I've spent a lot of this last 2 weeks, and not a little of the previous couple of weeks, on the floor of the cathedral, or at the doors of the cathedral. Much more than I would normally be spending there in more ordinary times that have occupied many past years for me. I've gone over there, as have my colleagues. When the cathedral has been open, one or other of us clergy from the cathedral will be present, and because a couple of us are taking holiday at the moment, that's upped the number of sessions that I'm covering. So I will have spent, well, I have now spent this week, these last 5 days, Monday to Friday, I've spent 18 hours, 3-hour sessions, 5 of them, in the body of the cathedral, which has actually been, for me, it's been quite a lot of standing up, but it's been a rare privilege, to be honest, one that I've really enjoyed. It's been quite warm work. I've been wearing that woolen cassock all through this period. Today it's been no excuse to be cold. But it's such a joy to be able to welcome people back into this cathedral. So I've, in the course of these times when I've been over there, I have, because I have no particular brief while I'm there, I have tended to circulate. I've tended to move around, more or less, the circuit that we have now provided within the cathedral, which comes in at the west entrance into the cathedral in the cloisters, goes through the cathedral, round the east end of the cathedral, out through the south transept and the cloisters and the works yard, and back to the west outside in the lawns. In the course of this morning, I think I did that 4 times, and excuse me, lingered at various points, talked with various people. It's been such a pleasure because it's been a reminder of what we've been missing all these last few months. One of the things that we take for granted here is being able to extend hospitality to usually tourists, but many others besides, people who come here for a whole variety of reasons and may not even intend to come into the cathedral when they come. It's being around the cathedral so much has allowed me to engage with not just people, but things around the cathedral, because obviously there are lulls in these periods. And I've been able to look at the works of art that we are showing within the cathedral, to look at the windows of the cathedral, to talk to staff whom I'd rarely or normally have a chance to talk to. You get the picture. It's all these different things. And these have also served to remind me afresh of the extraordinary diversity of things that we are and do here. Around the cathedral, as I've said, there's all these extraordinary works of art provided for this year, 2020. The refectory, now open again, I'm glad to say. The shop now open again. The works yard with its extraordinarily skilled masons and glaziers and so forth. The product, the fruits of their labours, waiting to be set into the walls of the cathedral. I've also been, as I've taken these things in, I've also been in the churchyard, of course, because I have to get from my house to the cathedral. And I walk past every day the graves which are in the churchyard, which when the grass is lush are not visible because they've been grassed over and there are no monuments around them. But when the ground is dry, the grass dries out and exposes by the profile where these graves are. There was an 18th century plan of the churchyard, and I've been comparing those marks on the ground with that plan. It's just little points of interest for me. There are other things I haven't yet gone back into in the cathedral. The library is one of them. I'm actually personally responsible for the library, in theory at least now. And there is a document in there, one of our oldest books, which has been spent most of last year being conserved and rebound. And I am very keen to see it again now that it is back in the cathedral. I look forward to that very much and hope I can do that next week. You get something of the flavour of the great range of things we do here. And I would say the thing I've most enjoyed, but not just those things, but actually has been being outside the west front of the cathedral, where people are passing by in great numbers from Harnham, walking past the front of the cathedral as they go into town in many cases, or coming into the churchyard simply to sit out in the sun, play with their friends. Some of them looking tentatively at the cathedral door, wondering if they can go in, or what if they do they're going to find in there. Many coming with a pre-booking and a clear plan to come into the cathedral, and that's relatively simple. But standing outside the cathedral's west front with a couple of colleagues and having the, as it were, leisure to interact not just with those colleagues but with people who are passing by or arriving is such a rare pleasure and privilege for me. All sorts of things happen in those conversations with passers-by. The people I've spoken to today have been from France, from the Philippines, from various parts of the UK, from further afield, and many from who have probably Netherlands accents or similar, but I haven't asked because it's not really my business to know where people come from. I'm just simply delighted they're here. A great diversity of people comes within our orbit here, and as well as all of that, people come, because I'm standing out there looking rather conspicuous in a cassock, people come up and ask me questions or want to take a photograph with me or something rather amusing like that. I've been asked odd questions today, for example, and this would be typical of other days too, a conversation about confession and what the meaning of confession is, a conversation about my title, and usually that's some question about whether I'm a Roman Catholic or not, and whether that means that people should call me father or not, or of course I don't much care what people call me. I usually introduce myself as Edward. There was a question, rather interesting and earnest, a serious conversation about clairvoyancy, some of whom this really was very personal and important. As well, of course, as a number of conversations about where is the Magna Carta, where are the toilets, that kind of thing. This all reminds me so strongly, that process of standing outside the cathedral, engaging with the strangers who happen to pass by, and whatever the reason they're there, is exactly as it was, funnily enough, when I had a huge Victorian church which let out at the west end of that church onto a pavement in a high street in South London, when I was vicar there 30 or so years ago. People passed by going to the station for all sorts of reasons. Very few normally came into the church, but if the doors were open 2 or 3 yards off the pavement, and if someone was in that margin, me for example, people often engaged and might well come in. And all those things on the margins which break that boundary between the church and the outside, which enable people to step over that margin, that boundary. These things are just vitally important. That's why we have art around the cathedral outside. That's why we have a tea shop in the close. to enable people to feel comfortable crossing those boundaries between the inside, as it were, the holy sacred space, and the outside, where they could be doing anything they like, more or less. Because people do need to feel, intentionally or just implicitly, invited into God's space. I think the hesitancy is entirely natural. If I look at a shop, however much I'm being encouraged to get in there, unless I can see what's for sale in there and that I can get out without buying, I'm quite hesitant about going in, and I have no reason to think people don't feel some analogy to that when they go past a Christian church or a cathedral. The hesitancy may be natural, but the invitation is a real and overpowering one, because it's God's invitation actually into his space. I'm reminded of George Herbert's poem, one of his, I think, 3 poems, called Love. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack, from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. Love said, you shall be he. I, the unkind, ungrateful? Ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. And know you not, says Love, who bore the blame? My dear, then I will serve. You must sit down, says Love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and eat. There's an element of compulsion about the invitation of God. And the next phrase that is printed in the book after that poem is, glory be to God on high, and on earth peace, goodwill towards men. Amen. Goodbye.